Hey guys, tonight we step into a world that barely made a sound. Not because it wasn't busy, not because it wasn't dangerous, but because in this world, even a whisper could break centuries of delicate trust. Welcome to the secretive coded world of medieval falconers, their hidden languages, their silent signals, and their quiet conversations with the sharpest hunters in the sky. And let's be real, you probably wouldn't survive this one, unless you've got a steady arm, a sharp eye, and a pretty decent tolerance for getting scratched by talons the size of your fingers. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where my fellow travelers are tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the misty fields at dawn. The ground is soft beneath your boots, damp with dew. Somewhere ahead you hear a sharp whistle, thin, barely audible, but immediately answered by the sudden swoop of wings slicing the sky like a blade. The falconer stands calm, arm extended, gloved hand, steady as his bird circles and descends in a perfect arc. The raptor lands lightly, feathers ruffling as it shifts its razor-sharp talons onto the thick leather cuff. The falconer murmurs something under his breath, words you can't quite catch, and the bird visibly relaxes. This isn't just training. This is a language. You watch as several other falconers gather nearby. They barely speak aloud, communicating with subtle nods, coded hand movements, and faint clicks of the tongue. It's a dance of trust between human and bird, and between falconers who know how easily a misstep or a wrongly timed shout could ruin everything. Historians still argue whether these secret bird languages evolved purely from practical necessity, or whether they became secretive to protect elite knowledge. Either way, they're fascinating to witness. You hear one falconer call out softly, "Hoo-hoo, Rish." The sound isn't meant for human ears. It's a specific call this particular falcon has learned means circle back or hover close. The bird adjusts its flight almost immediately. The fields buzz with quiet energy. Nobles on horseback watch from a distance, wrapped in fine wool and velvet, eager for the demonstration to begin. To them, the falcons are status symbols. To the falconers, they are living partnerships. You spot a young apprentice gently adjusting a falcon's jesses, the leather straps tethered to its legs. He hums under his breath, not a melody, but a rhythmic pulse that keeps the bird calm. The sound is barely louder than the breeze, but carries meaning to the raptor who's heard it since hatching. One master falconer leans toward you and grins softly. If your bird trusts your voice, she'll trust your world. Speak wrong, and she's gone forever. The birds themselves seem aware of the tension. You notice how each responds differently to their handlers, some with eager head bobs, others with still narrowed eyes locked on distant prey. Falconry is an ancient tradition, stretching back far beyond medieval Europe. You're standing inside a craft shaped by centuries of refinement, where the secret language of bird and handler has evolved alongside politics, war, and shifting empires. Even now, you see how certain signals are designed for both bird and audience. A particular whistle might mean rise higher to the hawk, but also signal to watching lords that the falconer is controlling the hunt with expert precision. Historians still debate how much of this coded language was shared across regions or jealously guarded by local guilds and courts. But one thing's clear, falconry isn't a hobby. It's a finely tuned craft where every whisper, every click, every gesture serves a precise purpose. The nobles murmur approval as a peregrine locks its wings and dives a stoop with terrifying speed. You can feel the pressure drop in the air as the bird plummets toward its prey. With a sharp kek-kek call from the falconer, the bird pulls slightly to adjust its angle mid-hunt. The hare never stood a chance. The falconer calls again, softer this time, and the bird circles back obediently. The kill is shared between bird and handler, a reward and a ritual built on years of training. You notice how, even during feeding, the falconer mutters gentle phrases, not random sounds, specific tones and cadences that keep the raptor calm while eating, preventing aggression or possessiveness over the kill. These too are part of the secret bird language, a blend of soothing rhythm, consistent words, and intentional calm. Another handler nearby claps twice in rapid succession, a cue for his hawk to shift to his gloved hand after a successful strike. The precision is mesmerizing. No shouting, no sharp commands. Only a seamless, almost telepathic exchange between species. You catch one final moment before the hunt ends. Two falconers exchanging a glance, one tapping his thumb twice against his palm. It's subtle but clear. They're signaling perhaps to adjust distance, perhaps to coordinate which bird takes the next quarry. Even their private communication is built from these unspoken codes. As the sun begins to climb higher, you realize you've barely scratched the surface. This language of whispers and feathers runs deeper than you imagined. Tomorrow, you'll follow these falconers back into their lord's manor, where you'll see how falconry wasn't just a sport, but a full-blown status symbol in medieval power games. You trail behind the falconers as they return from the hunt, their birds hooded, now perched calmly on gloved hands. The manor rises ahead, stone towers wrapped in ivy banners fluttering from wooden spires. Inside these halls, falconry isn't just a quiet art. It's a loud proclamation of status. You step into the great courtyard where nobles cluster in small groups, their fine cloaks embroidered with family crests. They sip warm, spiced wine eyes, flickering toward each returning falcon. Some pretend indifference. Others admire, openly leaning in for whispered evaluations, like jewelers appraising diamonds. Historians still argue whether falconry was primarily a practical hunting method or an elaborate social display. The truth, it was both, and neither could exist without the other. You notice how the hierarchy isn't limited to nobility alone. Even among the falconers, rank whispers everywhere. At the top stands the master falconer, an older man with calm eyes and a beard streaked silver. His hooded gerfalcon rests like a coiled spring on his fist. Around him, junior falconers carry slightly smaller birds, merlins, kestrels, goshawks, each still impressive, but chosen carefully, according to the rank of their handlers. One nobleman gestures you closer, eager to share his prized bird, a white gerfalcon, rare and stunning, its pale feathers shimmering like moonlit snow. Fit for kings, he boasts. And he's not exaggerating. In many medieval courts, laws dictated exactly which rank could fly which species. Emperors and kings' gerfalcons, dukes peregrines, knights sakers, clergy merlins or sparrowhawks. Even the birds carried their own coat of arms, so to speak. You glance toward a cluster of lower-ranking knights, each gripping smaller hawks, careful not to stand too close to their betters. The falcons may not recognize social ladders, but the humans do, and fiercely. Historians still debate whether these falconry rules were strictly enforced or flexed, depending on wealth and royal favor. But every noble knew the message your bird signaled your power before you spoke a word. Inside the great hall, mounted perches line the stone walls, each carved and padded for its feathered occupant. Hooded and resting, the birds twitch their heads now and then, reacting to faint sounds that humans barely register. You hear murmured snippets from nearby conversations. The Duke's bird refused to stoop yesterday. Lord Geoffrey's kestrel took a goose last week, unheard of. Her Highness imported hers from Arabia, 4 times the price. These aren't idle anecdotes. They're social chess moves disguised as bird talk. Every successful hunt, every rare acquisition, every flawless stoop adds another invisible jewel to a lord's crown. One falconer explains it with a knowing smirk. A nobleman may lie about his titles, his bird cannot. Beyond the performances, falconry provides intimate access to power itself. You spot a falconer adjusting a noblewoman's glove, his hands briefly guiding hers as the bird shifts weight. That simple gesture earns him a smile and earns him rumors whispered among envious onlookers. Historians still argue whether falconers held true influence in court or remained servants despite their skill. But watching them now, you sense the quiet leverage they hold. They are custodians of symbols that make or break reputations. The manor steward waves you toward a side chamber where young squires receive instruction. A master falconer lectures them on feeding schedules, hood training, and hunting etiquette. But woven between the lessons are unspoken rules of courtly behavior. Never boast louder than your bird's skill. Never let your falcon refuse twice in public. Never insult another man's bird. Violating these codes can spark feuds that outlast any actual hunt. You observe a squire nervously lift a young merlin onto his glove, his hands trembling slightly as the bird ruffles its wings. The master falconer steps in, gently adjusting the boy's stance. Speak steady. Breathe. Let the bird feel your calm. The advice applies far beyond the perch. In these circles, appearance is everything. The falcon mirrors its handler, not just in flight, but in status, confidence, and control. And this too shapes the secret languages of falconry. Many signals exist not only for the bird's benefit, but for those watching from the sidelines. A perfectly timed gesture signals mastery. A mistimed cue can unravel a season's worth of social climbing. Even the simplest words, hup, whoa, stay, carry more weight when spoken before nobles who know exactly what flawless control looks like. And when those words fail, embarrassment lingers like a stain on fine silk. You watch as one young lord's kestrel refuses to take flight, hopping instead along his arm, while servants suppress awkward coughs. His flushed face says everything. The language failed. The rank wobbled. The gossip begins before the bird even returns to its perch. As evening shadows stretch across the manor walls, the falcons are unhooded one last time for gentle evening flights under the fading sun. Their silhouettes slice across the sky, sharp and elegant. The nobles watch with quiet pride, their reputations soaring or stumbling alongside each wing beat. Tomorrow you'll leave the manor walls behind and follow the falconers into their private daily rituals where secret gestures, coded murmurs, and whispered cues fill every moment long before any hunt begins. The first gray light of dawn stretches across the fields as you rise early, following the falconers long before the nobles even open their eyes. This is their world now, with the falconer's daily ritual and private language performed quietly, almost like a ceremony shared only between human and bird. You trail behind as they move, with the kind of silent efficiency born from years of practice. No wasted steps, no loud orders. Every movement is intentional, every sound carefully controlled. Historians still argue whether these daily routines were strictly functional or deeply ceremonial. But watching them now, it's impossible not to feel the reverence pulsing beneath the surface. Inside, a modest stone mews the specialized falcon house rows of perches hold resting birds, their heads hidden beneath intricate leather hoods. The hoods themselves are minor masterpieces, sewn tight but soft, decorated with simple patterns. Each bird's hood is unique, helping both bird and handler ease into the day. The falconers move slowly at first. Even a small surprise could spook the birds into injury or panic. Soft humming fills the space, not songs exactly, but rhythmic calming murmurs. These steady sounds signal to the birds that everything is safe. You hear it clearly now. Shh. Shh. Easy now, easy. The falcons seem to respond. A foot shifts, a wing flexes, but no alarm rises. The first hood is gently removed. One handler softly clicks his tongue 3 times, a specific cue his bird has heard since its earliest training days. The falcon responds by spreading its wings slightly, allowing the falconer to check its feathers for damage. You observe how each falconer has developed personalized cues with their birds. A sharp whistle means step up. A soft hand tap means stay still. 2 short claps mean prepare for hooding. Historians still debate whether these individualized cues arose out of necessity or evolved into private languages, intentionally a signature system that identified each falconer's unique style. At the feeding station, The falconers prepare breakfast. Slices of quail pigeon and rabbit are portioned out with surgical precision, each bird receiving exactly what its weight and training schedule demand. Overfeeding a falcon dulls its hunting edge. Underfeeding breeds agitation. Balance is everything. You notice one falconer holds up a morsel while uttering a low, guttural rrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr forward for the bite. Even feeding is done through controlled signals trust built into every motion and sound. Nearby, an apprentice works with a younger hawk, guiding it onto a gloved hand with exaggerated slowness. His mentor corrects him with a single word, smoother, because falconry isn't about domination. It's about negotiation, a shared vocabulary that must feel natural to the bird. Too harsh and trust cracks. Too soft and the bird ignores you. The morning routine continues with weight checks, another critical piece of their coded system. A falcon's hunting readiness is largely determined by its weight. Too heavy, it's lazy. Too light, it's frantic. Each bird is weighed daily, and every handler keeps a personal record, their secret ledger of their bird's rhythms. One falconer quietly notes today's weight into a small leather-bound book. You sneak a peek, Arden 610 grams. Slightly high. Reduce midday portion. Even these weight logs carry their own shorthand symbols and insider codes, part of the falconer's private language, known only to their guilds or apprentices. After feeding, the falcons are taken outside for weathering, a chance to stretch wings, soak in early sun, and adapt to wind conditions. Ropes tether them safely to low perches, arranged in a semicircle. Here too, the falconers maintain constant communication. Low whistles, tongue clicks, soft repetitions of each bird's name, like a chant. These sounds reinforce comfort and familiarity, critical for keeping highly strung raptors calm in a world full of sudden noises. One falcon spreads its wings as a breeze rolls through, and its handler whispers, "There we are, girl. Ride the wind. Remember the feel." You watch as falconers also use touch cues, gentle strokes along certain feathers, slow palm rubs along taloned feet. These aren't affection as we know it. They're trust exercises, conditioning the birds to associate handling with calm rather than threat. Historians still argue whether these tactile routines emerged purely from practicality or evolved into deeply psychological bonding techniques. Either way, they work. You can see it with your own eyes. As the sun lifts higher, the falconers begin checking equipment bells, jesses, hoods, and leashes. Every piece is inspected, cleaned, and repaired if needed. A frayed jess strap could mean a lost bird in flight. Every failure here carries consequences. Even their gear carries coded marks, tiny stamps, knots, or stitching patterns, identifying which bird it belongs to, who crafted it, and sometimes even which guild the falconer serves. Nothing in this world is random. Finally, before the noble hunting party assembles, the falconers gather briefly, speaking in low tones, not just planning routes, but reviewing the bird's morning moods. Elric's kestrel is high-strung today. The Duke's peregrine stooped clean yesterday. Expect eagerness. Watch for tailwinds, adjust whistle tone accordingly. You realize that what appears to outsiders as effortless mastery is built upon layers of subtle preparation, a woven tapestry of whispered commands, coded notes, physical habits, and tiny adjustments invisible to anyone not trained in this secret world. Tomorrow, you'll follow these falconers beyond the ritual into the roots of their secret language itself. How this coded jargon evolved across borders, languages, and centuries into the intricate private system they still guard fiercely. The sun arcs higher as you walk alongside the falconers. But today, you're not simply watching them work. You're stepping into the deeper layers of their world, into the origin of falconry's secret jargon. Because while the birds soar and swoop, the handlers speak in a language few outside their circles truly understand. You listen as the falconers chatter softly, switching seamlessly between ordinary speech and strange, almost musical phrases whenever they discuss their birds. Her mantling was tight at the strike. He cast his gorge well this morning. That one's Yarrick, but watch his footing. To your ears, it sounds like a riddle. But every word here carries centuries of coded meaning developed by falconers across Europe, Arabia, Persia, and even as far as Mongolia. Historians still argue whether this jargon evolved independently in each culture or spread along trade routes, adapting like the birds themselves to new landscapes. But you can hear echoes of many tongues blending into one specialized dialect. You pause as a young apprentice struggles to describe his hawk's behavior. His master interrupts gently. No, boy, not restless baiting. She's baiting. You learn that baiting means when a falcon beats its wings trying to fly prematurely while still tethered. The term isn't just descriptive. It's diagnostic. One word replaces a sentence. That precision matters in a world where a single missed cue can lose a bird forever. You soon realize how much of this language was built not only to talk about the birds, but to talk to them. Short, rhythmic, often soft-spoken words, easy for the falcon to recognize, hard for outsiders to interpret. Take hoba, a sound used to encourage a falcon back to the fist. Or su-saw, a soft, repetitive hiss to calm a bird mid-flight. Every falconer develops variations layering personal tone over tradition. Historians still debate whether these syllables mimic natural bird sounds or are designed to cut through the noise of wind and field. Both theories hold weight. The rhythm soothes the bird. The clarity carries across great distances. You hear them use terms for the bird's moods too. Yarrak, when a falcon is perfectly hungry, sharp and eager to hunt. Haggard, a wild adult bird harder to tame. Iyas, a chick raised by humans from the nest. Each word acts like shorthand for entire phases of training, crucial for coordinating between handlers, with no room for long explanations. You follow a falconer into a shaded corner where they're prepping young birds for their first flights. Here you witness another layer of this language, the blending of gesture with sound. A raised fist signals readiness. A twist of the wrist signals release. A short double whistle signals recall. Words alone aren't enough. The birds read the entire performance, posture, tone, rhythm, and timing. You watch as an apprentice accidentally tenses his shoulder while calling. The falcon hesitates, unsure. His master corrects him softly. Speak through your arm as much as your voice. Historians still argue whether this gestural component is conscious choreography or evolved instinct. The falconers themselves simply call it the feel. The guildmaster pulls you aside to share another layer regional dialects within the jargon itself. In England, they say lofting for soaring flights. In Persia, Bazdari describes the art of falconry itself. In Mongolia, Berkitchi names the eagle hunter, who uses whistles that echo across snowy cliffs. The words change. The intent remains constant precision through brevity. Even within single regions, subtle differences mark a falconer's lineage or guild. A man from Normandy might use one recall whistle, a man from Florence another. Yet both falcons understand their masters perfectly. This fragmented yet universal language made falconry oddly resistant to cultural boundaries. Mongol khans, European kings, Arab caliphs all traded birds techniques, and sometimes entire teams of falconers across continents. And with each exchange, the private language expanded, growing richer, more layered, more impenetrable to outsiders. You hear one older falconer joke, "A man may steal my bird, but not my words." Without the words, the bird stays wild. Indeed, many of these secret phrases served another role: protection of trade secrets. A rival noble might steal a prized falcon, but without knowing its calls, cues, or training signals, the bird would fly blind or fly away entirely. Historians still debate whether these languages qualify as true secret codes or highly specialized professional jargon. But in the guarded world of medieval falconry, there's often little difference between the two. As the afternoon sun slants lower, you realize you've only scratched the surface of these whispered languages, a blend of necessity, secrecy, culture, and devotion that few outsiders ever hear fully spoken. Tomorrow you'll follow the falconers back into the field, not to hunt this time, but to witness how they train these powerful birds using these very coded cues, teaching them to trust voice signal and touch in place of instinct. The sun barely crests the horizon as you return to the wide-open fields where the real work begins. Today, you'll watch the falconers perform their quiet choreography training hawks, with coded cues turning wild instinct into a partnership balanced on the edge of instinct and language. You stand back as an apprentice prepares a young falcon for one of its earliest training sessions. The bird bounces slightly on the glove eye's sharp wings flicking with nervous energy. Even at rest, it's a creature of controlled violence, a coiled spring masked in feathers. The falconer speaks softly, repeating short, clipped phrases you've heard before. Steady, hoba. Steady now. The rhythm soothes like a lullaby, though the bird understands only the tone, the pace, and the trust behind the voice. Historians still argue whether these training languages are purely functional sounds or designed rituals passed down like sacred incantations. Either way, the pattern matters far more than the words themselves. The falconer steps forward into the field, carrying a long creance line, a thin, sturdy cord attached to the bird's jesses. This gives the young falcon limited freedom, while still offering control should instinct overcome training. The apprentice gently lifts his arm and the cue for release. Subtle, a tiny shift of balance, a slight turn of the wrist. The bird leaps skyward with a soft burst of wind wings spreading wide, but tethered gently by the line. You watch as the falconer uses short, high-pitched whistles paired with sweeping hand gestures. A single whistle means circle wide. A double pulse means return. A long trill means prepare to stoop. Each cue is paired with consistent reinforcement, small food rewards, calming murmurs, careful adjustments. Over time, these sounds become more than signals. They're part of the falcon's internal rhythm. You overhear the master explaining to a group of new apprentices. The bird hears your whistle. The bird sees your arm. The bird feels your breath. Fail one, and you fail all. Here, the training isn't about domination. It's about building a shared vocabulary, wordless and worded, that links two entirely different minds. You notice another apprentice working with a kestrel, a smaller, faster bird using a small lure, a leather pouch tied to a line, often decorated with feathers to resemble prey. He swings the lure gently in wide arcs, while calling softly, hoop, hoop, hup. The kestrel locks its eyes on the lure, diving swiftly before landing lightly onto the glove. The handler immediately rewards it with a bite of quail meat, pairing the successful flight with the trusted sound. Historians still debate whether falconers originally mimicked prey sounds or simply developed distinctive syllables that stood out against wind distance and battlefield chaos. The result, however, remains universally effective. You learn that every falconer develops slight, personal variations at their own tempo, whistle pitch, or cadence, allowing the birds to distinguish not only the command, but the person behind it. As you observe, you realize how layered this language truly is. Auditory cues, whistles, trills, words. Visual cues, arm positioning, lure, motion, eye contact. Tactile cues, light taps, shifts, and glove pressure, balanced hand movements. Emotional cues, calm breathing, steady posture, consistent routine. All work together, teaching the bird to rely on the falconer's guidance while channeling its own formidable instincts. A master falconer demonstrates the next phase free flight training. This time, the creance is removed. The bird launches into open sky, circling higher and higher, while the falconer whistles softly, keeping the rhythm alive. The trust here is palpable. At any moment, the falcon could vanish into the horizon, returning to wildness. But instead, it turns back, drawn not by leash or fear, but by a connection built through these shared coded sounds. The falconer lifts his arm, high, fist clenched, a visual cue. He calls out a sharp, rising, hup hup. The falcon folds its wings and dives. The stoop is breathtaking, silent, controlled, lethal if prey had been present. But this is only a drill. When the bird lands cleanly on the glove, the falconer rewards it not only with meat, but with calm, quiet praise. "Well done, girl. Well done." These words carry no literal meaning to the bird. Yet the tone, timing, and repetition form part of the language, a sensory contract between man and raptor. You also witness correction drills. One falcon misjudges a landing and flutters awkwardly. The handler doesn't scold, but calmly repositions, repeating the same cues, the same tone, as if nothing went wrong. Consistency is key. Fear breaks trust faster than failure. Historians still debate whether medieval falconry was truly superior in skill to modern practices, or if today's falconers simply lack the same social and military stakes that once drove this intense precision. But watching these training sessions, it's clear the mastery was, and still is, profoundly delicate. As the afternoon sun begins its slow descent, the falconers gather for final training flights, rotating birds through these intricate routines. Each call, each whistle, each gesture is part of a private script known only to the falconer and his feathered partner. Tomorrow, you'll watch how these nonverbal commands grow even more intricate, with claps, murmurs, and subtle gestures guiding full hunts, and how entire conversations unfold without a single human word spoken aloud. The wind stiffens as you return to the open field. Today, the falconers leave words behind almost entirely. Instead, you watch the subtle ballet of whistles, claps, and murmurs, nonverbal commands that speak directly to the sharp eyes and instincts of their birds. The air carries that crisp edge, again the one you've come to recognize as hunting weather. Perfect for practicing the most silent parts of falconry's private language. Historians still argue whether these silent signals developed purely out of necessity or evolved to add another layer of secret communication, especially when hunting near rival courts or enemy lands. Either way, they've become as vital as the spoken phrases themselves. The falconers gather their birds for weathering, first quietly watching how each reacts to the shifting wind. Subtle wing flexes, head bobs, or sharp tail flicks are read like words. No orders are given, just assessments made silently between handler and bird. One master falconer steps forward with his peregrine, her hood removed. His hands glide through a well-practiced sequence of gestures. A slight roll of his wrist, prepare for launch. A small forward-leaning sway, lift off. An extended arm with a slight upward tilt, gain altitude. The bird obeys instantly, reading not his words, but the feel of his body. The more you watch, the more it seems like they're dancing two beings tethered by invisible threads of familiarity. Nearby, another falconer works with a goshawk, a more nervous, high-strung bird. This time, he uses soft claps, keeping them short and even. One clap circle wider. Two sharp claps return to perch. A flutter of fingers shift altitude. Historians still debate whether these signals originally came from imitating prey noises, like the wing snaps of frightened birds, or simply evolved as universally visible markers across distances. Either way, the birds know exactly what's being asked. You hear faint murmurs as well, not words, but low rhythmic hums vibrating through the handler's chest. These sounds seem more for calming than commanding, like a familiar tune that keeps nerves steady on both ends of the glove. A younger apprentice whispers softly while feeding his kestrel. Who? Easy. Who? The bird stays focused, head low, posture relaxed. The cadence soothes, preventing any sudden jerks or aggressive lunges during feeding. You realize these murmurs serve another purpose. They create a predictable audio environment for the birds. Consistency reinforces trust. Noise signals danger. The murmur says, all is well, stay with me. A master falconer notices your fascination and smiles. Our words fail in wind and rain, he says. But rhythm always reaches them. He demonstrates how even glove pressure becomes a nonverbal tool. A gentle squeeze of the fingers communicates readiness. A slight palm shift signals caution. To the bird, the handler's hand becomes as expressive as a face. Further out on the field, you witness more advanced drills. A gerfalcon circles high above as its handler tracks its movement using only small controlled movements of his lure. Faster swings to increase pace. Slower, wider arcs. Prepare to stoop. A sudden freeze, target approaching. The falcon mirrors these cues without hesitation. The human never calls, never whistles. His entire body becomes the message. Historians still argue whether falconers intentionally developed these silent systems to conceal tactics from rival hunters or simply refined them, because quiet communication proved more effective with highly sensitive birds. Either way, silence is often the strongest language here. Even among the falconers themselves, silent signals maintain coordination during multi-bird hunts. A raised eyebrow might signal my bird takes lead. A slight nod might mean release second bird. A hand resting on the hip might indicate delay your release. These gestures create a wordless hierarchy understood only by those trained long enough to read the language of hands, breath, and timing. At one point, you see a falcon briefly spook, startled by a distant hawk cry. The handler responds instantly, no shout, no harsh motion. Instead, he drops his arms slightly, lowers his gaze, and breathes deeply. The bird watches him, settles, and resumes its stance. The entire correction takes 3 seconds, entirely nonverbal. One elder falconer shares an old guild saying, "Sahel, your bird hears your fingers before your mouth." Even in failures, the language adapts. If a falcon misses its target or misjudges its dive, the handler won't shout in frustration. He'll wait calmly, reset posture, and lure position, and resume the cues. The lesson continues through steady repetition, never panic. You also glimpse rare hand signals that are passed quietly between guild members. A twisted thumb for dangerous winds, a flicked pinky for approaching predators, a palm flattening downward to end a session early. These signals aren't just for the birds, they're part of the falconer's own internal code, keeping each other informed during group hunts without breaking the bird's concentration. As the sun dips once again, the field slowly empties. Birds are hooded bells muted, and handlers quietly share nods as they return to their mews. Another day of silent dialogue complete. Tomorrow, you'll explore how this bond between falconer and bird runs even deeper, a sacred relationship built on patience whispers and a lifetime of wordless trust. The sun rises gentle and golden as you follow the falconers into their private sanctum once more. Today isn't about drills or spectacle. It's about something quieter, far more intimate. The sacred bond between falconer and bird, stitched together through endless repetition of soft language, careful trust, and subtle rituals, invisible to outsiders. You watch as the falconers move through their morning routines, but now you see the nuances that had once blended into the background. This isn't just feeding, cleaning, and weighing. It's dialogue, constant, careful dialogue, where even silence carries weight. Historians still argue whether this bond was purely pragmatic, or if falconers developed a genuine emotional connection with their birds. But observing them now, it's hard not to sense something profoundly personal. One falconer gently removes the hood from his soccer falcon. The bird blinks against the light head, tilting slightly toward its handler's face. No words are exchanged, but an entire conversation unfolds. I am here. I am calm. You are safe. You notice how every falconer adapts his entire presence for his bird. The rhythm of his breathing, the steadiness of his hand, even the softness of his footsteps, all tuned to reinforce safety. The master falconer explains quietly without breaking eye contact with his bird. They read our hearts faster than our words. You spot one young apprentice learning to handle a new bird. His mentor corrects him gently, not in posture or technique, but in patience. You cannot hurry trust, he says. Speak softly. Move slowly. Let her come to you. Indeed, many falcons in their early training simply sit beside their handlers for hours at a time, hooded or not. This practice, called manning, teaches the bird to view its human not as threat or competitor, but as part of its environment. Historians still debate whether manning techniques originated independently across cultures or spread along falconry's global network. The universality suggests that falconers everywhere reach the same conclusion: trust is built in silence. You observe how feeding itself becomes a bonding ritual. One falconer offers small cuts of meat by hand, speaking barely above a whisper as the bird plucks each piece. Good girl, easy, steady now. The rhythm of speech almost becomes a chant, familiar as heartbeat. These feeding murmurs serve more than comfort. They reinforce that the handler controls the meal, establishing gentle dominance without fear or aggression. Over time, the bird begins to associate these quiet cadences with safety, sustenance, and order. The falconers also maintain strict handling routines, consistent locations, consistent times, consistent interactions. Every deviation is controlled. Predictability, they say, teaches trust as much as any word. One older falconer laughs softly. A nervous hand loses more birds than a strong wind. And you believe him. Watching them work, you see that even the falconer's mood affects the bird. Agitation ripples through the glove like static electricity. Calm steadiness breeds calm steadiness in return. You notice how tactile communication plays an enormous role here too. Gentle strokes over the bird's breast feathers, slow fingertip pressure on the talons, light palm movements encouraging balance shifts. These touches aren't just practical, they're part of the conversation. Historians still argue whether falconers developed these touch patterns through deliberate design or generations of accumulated instinct. Either way, they're astonishingly effective. Later in the afternoon, you witness an exercise in trust-building flights. The falconer releases his bird without credence, no tether, no safety net. The bird soars freely, testing not only its wings, but its loyalty. The falcon circles, catching thermals, while its handler stands motionless. A long pause stretches between them. Then, barely audible, a soft whistle floats upward. Hup, hup, hup. The falcon turns, eyes flashing, and returns to the glove. No chasing, no shouting. Only an invisible line drawn through shared experience. The falconer smiles. She comes because she chooses. That is true training. Even when mistakes happen, as they inevitably do, the bond remains central. A falcon that overshoots, hesitates, or misses its mark isn't scolded. The handler waits, resets, reassures. The conversation continues without blame. You begin to understand why these bonds became so sacred. In a world where noble courts rose and fell, where alliances shifted like the wind, the falconer and bird offered each other rare constancy, an honest partnership stripped of politic status or deceit. One master puts it best: kings may lie, falcons never do. And so, across the years, falcon and falconer build something precious, a shared language of trust, rhythm, and familiarity that outlasts most human alliances. Tomorrow, you'll widen your view and step beyond these familiar fields, exploring how falconry's secret languages spread across regional dialects, from England's formal codes to Arabia's chants to Mongolia's windswept whistles. The wind hums softly as you travel farther, stepping beyond the familiar mews and manor fields into the broad landscape where falconry's secret languages take on new shapes. Today, you walk through regional dialects, England, Arabia, and Mongolia, discovering how this quiet art adapted and transformed across continents. The world of falconry wasn't confined to one kingdom or one tongue. The language of bird and handler traveled like the birds themselves across deserts, mountains, and oceans. And everywhere it landed, it took root, branching into countless dialects, each shaped by culture, environment, and necessity. Historians still argue whether these variations developed independently or through cultural exchange along trade routes like the Silk Road. What's certain is that falconers, though divided by geography, somehow spoke the same universal grammar: trust, rhythm, repetition, but each with their own accent. You begin in medieval England, where falconry became woven into aristocratic identity, wrapped in courtly etiquette and rigid hierarchy. The Book of St. Albans, one of the earliest English texts on falconry, carefully outlines not just which birds belong to which ranks, but the specialized terms used: manning for taming, baiting for panicked wing flapping, rouse for feather shaking, mantling for guarding prey with spread wings. You listen as English falconers use their clipped, precise commands. Ho there, wear the lure, back to glove. The words are sharp measured, and often shouted across the misty fields designed to cut through England's damp winds and heavy forests. There's formality here, every syllable polished like silverware. Then your path carries you southward across arid lands into Arabia, where falconry isn't just sport, but a desert birthright, a cultural heartbeat. Here the tone softens. Commands are woven into gentle melodic phrases, often delivered as chants that calm both falcon and handler beneath the harsh desert sun. You hear one Bedouin falconer sing softly to his sucker falcon, "Sa, sa, ya habibi, shway shway." Slowly, slowly, my beloved. Easy now. Historians still debate whether these singing commands arose from tribal songs or desert poetry, but they seem designed not just for birds, but for the soul. In the endless sands where sharp winds could easily disorient, even the sharpest raptor tone and melody become anchors. You watch as falconers here rely heavily on whistles tuned by handmade reed flutes, each bird trained to recognize its own personalized note pattern. Even the equipment reflects their unique language. The hoods are lighter, looser, allowing air to circulate. The jesses are finely braided silk or soft leather, durable, yet gentle against delicate talons. The desert leaves no room for clumsy design. A falconer explains as he gently strokes his bird's chest, "In the desert force shatters trust. Only softness guides." Then you journey farther east to the sweeping steppes of Mongolia, where eagle hunters Burkichi carry falconry into an entirely different register. Here, golden eagles rule the skies, far larger and more powerful than their European cousins. And so the language shifts. Accordingly, bigger birds, bolder signals. The Mongolian handlers ride horseback across frozen plains, communicating through sharp, guttural calls and sweeping arm gestures that pierce bitter winds. Hoo-hoo, ga-ga! Their eagles respond to these calls, returning from distant cliff perches to land smoothly on thickly padded arms as riders gallop through snowdrifts. Whistles are rarely used. Instead, the physical synchronization between rider and bird replaces much verbal language. The eagle watches the rider's posture, the horse's pace, and subtle shifts in glove positioning to judge when to launch or return. Historians still debate whether Mongolian eagle training predates Persian and European falconry or grew independently alongside it. The isolation of the steppes allowed ancient techniques to survive here long after they faded elsewhere. The equipment reflects this rugged adaptation too. Thick, fur-lined gloves protect against talons as large as your hand. The hoods are heavier, insulating against frigid winds. Lures are often entire fox pelts dragged across snow, mimicking real hunts. One eagle master tells you with a rare laugh, "An eagle obeys when it chooses. We don't train them, we negotiate." And here too you see the same universal truth. Repeated consistency, patience, rhythm. Whether through sharp English commands, soft Bedouin songs, or Mongol calls carried on horseback, every falconer shapes a private language. Even within these differences, occasional words overlap, signs of an ancient, slow-moving exchange of knowledge across merchants, travelers, and empires. A Sogdian trader may have shared techniques with an Arab court. A Mongol emissary may have swapped methods with a Persian master. The bird languages evolved as the falcons themselves migrated. Historians still argue whether any master falconer could cross these regions and immediately grasp another's techniques. But the patterns, the heartbeat of trust, repetition, and ritual, remain instantly recognizable even across borders. As night falls once more, you realize you've now heard the whispers of falconers across continents, three unique voices singing different verses of the same ancient song. Tomorrow, you'll turn to an even more secretive layer of falconry. How these private languages not only trained birds, but protected trade secrets from rival nobles, desperate to steal hard-earned skills. The morning is heavy with tension as you walk among the falconers today. The air carries something different, not training, not trust-building, but secrecy. You've stepped into the murky side of this ancient art, how falconry language protected trade secrets and guarded hard-earned mastery from rival lords and jealous courts. In this world, a man's greatest asset isn't always his bird. It's the knowledge locked quietly inside his mouth. And as you'll soon see, falconers became experts not only in speaking to their birds, but in safeguarding their craft from prying ears. You pause near the mews as several falconers gather in a tight circle. Their voices hushed, words clipped and coded beyond even what you've grown accustomed to. Historians still argue whether these private codes were guild inventions or simply evolved organically from the natural competition between nobles. Either way, these secret languages formed invisible fences protecting techniques, limiting outsiders, and ensuring that only trusted apprentices inherited the craft. You listen carefully. Even simple terms are disguised with layered meaning. A bird that is soft on the foot might mean perfectly trained, or might mean dangerously unpredictable depending who's speaking. Rising at the lure might describe a flawless flight or mock a handler's sloppy lure work. High in Yarrick signals readiness, but only insiders know the precise weight range and behavioral markers behind that word. These coded phrases allow falconers to share vital information among themselves while leaving eavesdropping nobles none the wiser. You spot one falconer teaching his apprentice not just handling, but how to mask knowledge when nobles ask too many questions. If they ask about weight, say she's in her window. If they press, say she's flying sweet. Never give numbers. Historians still debate whether falconers intentionally created these evasive answers, or if nobles themselves accepted ambiguity as part of the falconry mystique. Regardless, it served both as protection and as a quiet assertion of professional superiority. You follow the master falconer as he steps into the records room, a small stone chamber filled with private training logs written in cryptic shorthand. Tiny marks track daily weights. Abbreviations mark behavioral shifts. Personal codes record training experiments. Only the falconer and his closest apprentices know how to read them fully. The bird's secrets are recorded, but the code protects them from courtly eyes. You watch an apprentice copying these records as part of his training. His mentor leans over him, murmuring, "If your book falls into wrong hands, let it say nothing." Even the tools carry layers of protection. Lures, gloves, and jesses are often marked with guild symbols or secret notches, identifying the owner's rank, lineage, and techniques. A rival falconer could recognize these signs, but a curious noble likely would not. At one point, you see two noble visitors attempt to coax a falconer into revealing more than he should. How do you keep her talons so? Even what weight do you fly her at? The falconer smiles politely. "As the wind allows, my lord. The bird tells me when she's ready." It's not deflection, it's an artful non-answer, polished over years. Sometimes protection was even more aggressive. Falconry guilds guarded their methods jealously. In certain cities, unlicensed falconers faced hefty fines or permanent banishment for revealing trade secrets outside guild lines. Historians still argue whether these guilds operated like formal medieval unions or loose family dynasties. But either way, their oaths were ironclad. Apprentices who broke their silence risked far more than lost reputation. You also learn that breeding knowledge was especially protected. Bloodlines of prized birds, particularly rare gyr falcons, were guarded like royal treasures. Breeding pairings were logged in ciphered ledgers. Nest locations were shared only within trusted circles. Egg theft was punishable by imprisonment or worse. The falconer's language itself became the ultimate gatekeeper. Without the right cues, terms, and rhythms, even a stolen bird could not be properly handled. One master sums it up simply: "A man may steal feathers, but he cannot steal patience." Even when nobles attempted to lure away skilled falconers with promises of higher pay, many refused. Their loyalty wasn't simply financial, it was cultural, familial, and secret-bound. And yet, ironically, falconry knowledge still spread slowly, carefully, like a river carving new channels. Traveling merchants captured falconers, and diplomatic exchanges occasionally leaked fragments of technique across borders. But full mastery that remained locked behind careful language. You hear of one famous case whispered by the Falconers themselves. The Emperor's envoy offered gold for a single whistle pattern. The master offered tea instead. You can't help but admire the quiet confidence behind their guarded words. For these Falconers, knowledge wasn't a commodity, it was a lineage, a sacred inheritance, and no price could unlock it without earned trust. As the sun sets, you realize these secret languages weren't just practical, they were powerful. In a medieval world where knowledge often meant survival, Falconers stood as quiet masters of both their birds and their guarded tongues. Tomorrow, you'll follow these secretive men into yet another unexpected corner. The royal courts where Falconers sometimes served as spies. Messengers and quiet informants, their whispered languages opening doors even swords could not. The morning unfolds with a different kind of tension as you walk not toward the fields this time, but toward the towering stone walls of the royal court. Here, falconry isn't only about the hunt or the bond with the bird today. You step into the world of the guilds that preserved falconer codes, quietly weaving their influence through both power and secrecy. Inside these walls, falconers move like shadows present, but often overlooked, trusted, but not fully seen. And yet, their role is anything but minor. These guilds don't just train birds. They train men who know how to carry knowledge across borders, maintain secrets, and serve lords who depend on both the spectacle and the subtle power falconry offers. Historians still argue whether these falconry guilds operated more like medieval trade organizations or like secret brotherhoods. But the reality you witness suggests both. You follow a master falconer into the inner hall where only guild members and trusted apprentices may enter. Inside, the air carries the faint aroma of oiled leather, fresh meat, and old parchment. On the walls hang crests, some marked with tiny engravings known only to insiders. These aren't merely decorative, they're silent contracts. Each guild maintained its own private language codes, variations of the bird signals and training jargon you've heard before, but layered with additional meaning. One whistle rhythm might mean prepare to hunt to the birds, but among guild brothers, it also signals that a certain nobleman is present. A particular glove gesture might cue a bird to rise, but also act as a subtle warning to another falconer to hold his tongue. Their apprenticeship system is rigid. Years of observation come first, silent work, cleaning mews, preparing food, mending hoods, learning not by direct instruction, but by absorbing patterns and behaviors like a bird itself learns to hunt. You watch as a boy apprentice stands near his master, repeating only the smallest words aloud. Mantling, baiting, yarak. His voice is soft but confident, testing the rhythm of the guild's protected tongue. The rest he learns by repetition, watching his master's hands, eyes, and breath. These guilds fiercely protect their ranks. Entry often requires family connections or rare sponsorship by a senior master. A noble might request his own falconer, but rarely could he appoint one without guild approval. Their networks are insulated, their knowledge passed only to the trusted few. Historians still debate whether these rigid structures were designed purely to maintain professional standards or to maintain control over lucrative patronage systems. You quickly realize both were at play. You're led next into the guild's record chamber rows of ledgers, coded in shorthand symbols that outsiders could hardly decipher. The guild doesn't just track bird lineages and flight logs. It tracks people, which noble favors which master, which rival lords seek particular breeds, which foreign envoys have expressed sudden interest in falconry demonstrations. Knowledge here is both a weapon and a shield. You hear whispers of how rival guilds sometimes traded coded messages hidden inside standard bird training discussions. His Merlin is flying light today. One falconer might remark, seemingly casual but carrying layered meanings known only to insiders. In some cases, falconry guilds even controlled market access for rare birds, restricting breeding stock to guild-sanctioned breeders and denying access to independent rivals. A noble without guild approval might find himself paying triple for an inferior hawk or none at all. Their methods extend beyond birds. The falconers serve often as informal messengers and trusted eyes within royal courts, their constant presence allowing them to overhear political conversations while appearing entirely preoccupied with their birds. One guild master confides to you, "People speak freely around a man holding a falcon. They forget we listen." Historians still argue whether falconry guilds directly influenced political decisions or simply served as silent observers, but court records hint at both. Some falconers were rumored to carry secret messages concealed within falconry equipment, hollowed lures with hidden scrolls, weighted bells carrying coded markings, hood linings stitched with symbols that only fellow guild members could read. You glimpse one such lure as it's quietly handed off a beautiful piece of leatherwork. But beneath the stitching, a strip of parchment hides, rolled tight and protected from prying eyes. The guild's code of silence extends beyond life itself. Oaths sworn by falconers often included vows never to reveal trade methods, breeding secrets, or client information, not even under threat of death. You hear of cases where rogue falconers who broke their vows were exiled stripped of rank or worse. Without guild protection, they lost not only employment, but the ability to acquire birds or clients. They were invisible men in a trade built on trust. And yet, this exclusivity wasn't simply about greed. It was also about preserving the craft's integrity. The guilds knew that improper training damaged not only birds, but reputations. A careless falconer could cost a noble prestige, ruin expensive hunts, or embarrass a kingdom during diplomatic displays. One elder sums it up as you leave. "We train not only birds, but honor." As night falls over the towering court walls, you finally glimpse how falconry was never merely about hunting. It was a quiet network of influence, loyalty, and control, guarded by men who whispered not just to their birds, but through every corner of power. Tomorrow, you'll step deeper into these political shadows, where falconers occasionally served as spies, leveraging their secret knowledge for kings and empires alike. The sky is still barely touched with morning light as you walk once more beside the falconers. But today, you're not watching a hunt or observing careful training drills. Today, you're stepping into the shadowed corridors, where falconers operate not only as masters of birds, but as spies, informants, and silent couriers inside royal courts. You've already seen how their secret codes protected trade secrets. But here, inside the political machinery of medieval empires, these quiet handlers often became indispensable agents in games of espionage and diplomacy. Historians still argue whether falconers volunteered for these covert roles, or were quietly conscripted into them by their lords. The truth likely rests somewhere in between. When you have access to both royalty and corridors, few others enter. You become very useful. You observe how the falconer's unique position allows them to move between worlds. They are trusted enough to accompany lords into private councils, yet invisible enough to hear things others might miss. Conversations slip out when nobles speak too freely during long hunts or relaxed banquets. One courtier, you overhear jokes. A falcon sees from the sky. His master sees from the shadows. Indeed, falconers often learn more about shifting alliances, secret treaties, and private rivalries simply by being present but unheard. You notice how their very presence seems to invite carelessness. Nobles lower their voices for scribes, guards, or advisors, but rarely for a man adjusting a falcon's jesses. The handlers become walls with ears. In one court, you witness a falconer quietly tending a gyr falcon, while nearby a pair of nobles whisper about an impending military campaign. The falconer's hands never pause. His face remains neutral. But you sense that every word is absorbed. And when his lord later requests a private report, every subtle detail reemerges, presented not as betrayal, but as loyal service. Historians still debate whether these reports traveled formally through royal networks, or whether falconers acted as personal confidants. But both roles made them valuable assets. Even beyond eavesdropping, falconers sometimes carried messages between courts, hidden not in writing, but in carefully coded phrases, passed face to face. The white falcon flew high today. His kestrel stooped early. The lure swings wide this season. To outsiders, these are simple bird metaphors. But to those in the know, they might signal troop movements, treaty shifts, or the mood of rival courts, one older falconer murmurs to you. Words whispered in a stable carry less risk than words sent by scroll. You also hear of falconers tasked with smuggling physical messages tucked into their birds' equipment. Tiny scrolls hidden beneath lure flaps, hollow jesses with tightly rolled notes, beaded hoods with subtle knot patterns encoding basic information. In extreme cases, trained falcons even served as living messengers, carrying light notes attached beneath their wings, flying across short distances where human couriers might be intercepted. You watch as one such bird returns from a distant hunting ground, landing silently on its master's glove. A quick practiced motion removes a tightly wrapped silk packet invisible beneath the bird's feathers. The message will pass directly into a lord's hands, bypassing every gate and spee in between. Historians still argue whether such messenger bird networks were widely used or simply rare high-risk operations. But standing here, seeing one in action, you realize how much trust and precision such missions required. Beyond pure espionage, falconers also served as informal diplomats, their skills making them valuable tokens exchanged between courts. An English king gifting a prized falcon and its handler to a French rival. An Arab prince sending a master falconer to train a Byzantine court. Mongol khans inviting Persian falconers to serve in distant steppe courts. These exchanges weren't only gestures of goodwill. They were opportunities to place trusted ears inside foreign power structures. One master falconer puts it plainly, where a bird perches, its master listens. Even beyond politics, some falconers acted as intelligence brokers, quietly selling information they gathered during hunts or travels to the highest bidder. A carefully placed rumor about a faltering alliance, a restless noble, or a weakened border could fetch as much as a rare hawk. But this was dangerous work. Falconers caught selling information faced exile or execution. And so most walked the razor's edge, carefully blending service with silenced knowledge, with discretion. You hear whispers of one legendary falconer who survived 3 courts serving kings who never realized he quietly funneled information between their rivals. His name never appeared in public records, but among guild halls his story lingers like smoke. The best spy, one falconer whispers to you, flies lower than the bird itself. As twilight falls over the palace grounds, you understand now how deeply entwined falconry's secret languages became, not just with birds, but with power itself. The language of flight call and whispered code extended beyond the muse, into the beating heart of medieval intrigue. Tomorrow you'll see how this secret language reached yet another frontier onto battlefields themselves, where falconers served not only as hunters, but as military scouts and silent messengers during war. The air feels sharper as you follow the falconers away from the manicured gardens of royal courts and into the rugged outskirts where armies gather. Today you witness another hidden layer of their craft, how birds in battle military falconry's coded commands became part of the quiet machinery of war. You would think these fragile, high-strung birds would have no place near clashing swords and thundering hooves. And yet falconers found ways to adapt their skills to the shifting demands of military strategy, transforming their silent language into tools for battlefield advantage. Historians still argue whether falcons played decisive tactical roles or simply served as mobile scouts and status symbols for generals. But as you watch, the blend of utility and symbolism becomes clear. At the front of a mobile war camp, you see several falconers preparing their birds not for hunting hares, but for surveying the open plains ahead of advancing forces. One master falconer explains softly as he adjusts a hood strap. Eyes in the sky move faster than spies on foot. The peregrines and sakkers trained for military work aren't meant to hunt, but to soar high, giving handlers visual clues about enemy positions, troop movements, or ambush sites hidden beyond the rolling hills. You watch as a peregrine takes to the air. The falconer uses coded arm signals and whistle patterns to control its flight path. 2 sharp whistles, gain altitude. A flat palm raised high, hold position. A low swooping gesture, Monk's roof return and report. The bird isn't reading maps. The falconer is reading the bird. As the falcon circles, it reacts to terrain, to movement far below. When the bird flinches or shifts its gaze repeatedly toward one direction, the falconer notes it. Something stirs beyond sight. Historians still debate whether this form of reconnaissance was widely practiced or limited to elite units. But records suggest several medieval armies experimented with avian scouts in both Europe and Asia. In the Mongol armies, for instance, eagle handlers accompanied cavalry scouts. Their massive birds were trained to circle wide over unfamiliar terrain, occasionally signaling back indirectly the presence of large movements fires or disturbed wildlife that might suggest an approaching enemy. A Mongol commander explains to you simply, "An eagle knows when prey panics before we do." Beyond surveillance birds served as mobile communication systems on chaotic battlefields, where shouting commands became useless in wind and noise. Falconers developed unique nonverbal codes to coordinate with cavalry flanks or nearby infantry. A downward fist pump signaled a retreat. 3 fast lure swings summoned reinforcements. Specific bird releases indicated pre-arranged flanking maneuvers. You see this in practice during a mock drill. A mounted falconer releases his soccer hawk, which circles wide as a visible marker to distant units. From afar, commanders use the bird's position as a living banner, updating them on battlefield formations without risking vulnerable messengers. Historians still argue whether these signaling systems were as complex as some romanticized stories suggest. But even basic visual signals proved invaluable during the confusion of war. At times, falconers even carried coded messages to field generals hidden inside their bird's equipment. You watch as one handler retrieves a tiny wax-sealed scroll from beneath his falcon's flight feathers, protected from rain, hidden from prying hands. In rare instances, falconers themselves became battlefield scouts, moving ahead of main forces under the guise of hunting parties. With their birds visible, they raised little suspicion, gathering intelligence on enemy camp locations or terrain weaknesses under the protection of plausible deniability. One veteran falconer shares his method with you. No man fears a hunter with a bird. They forget his eyes see everything. And even when armies camped for the night, falconers helped secure provisions. Their trained birds provided small game rabbits, birds and hares that fed soldiers without depleting nearby farmland, allowing armies to move lighter and more flexibly. Of course, military falconry was not without its risks. Birds lost in battle chaos, startled by war drums or siege engines, were nearly impossible to retrieve. Some accounts speak of entire bloodlines of prized birds vanishing during failed sieges or routed armies. You hear a sad tale whispered among falconers. At Antioch, the siege cost us not only men, but falcons. Falconry's role in war faded as new technologies, gunpowder artillery, and signal flags emerged. But for a time, these birds filled a quiet, adaptable niche no man, horse, or horn could replicate. And even after battle, falconers remained close to power. Their silent languages, already honed in courts and hunting fields, transitioned easily into military councils where coded words and loyal discretion continue to shape political outcomes. As night falls over the dimly lit war camp, you stand beneath the circling silhouettes of falcons, returning to their handlers, living shadows, whispering across battlefields, loyal not to flags or causes, but to the quiet hands that raised them. Tomorrow, you'll begin to witness how this extraordinary world, so rich with hidden language, trust, and politics, begins to decline as modernization erodes the old systems, slowly silencing the falconers' secret tongues. The wind carries a different weight as you walk beside the falconers, now not the crackling energy of the hunt or the whispered intensity of courtly intrigue, but a heavy stillness. You've arrived at the slow unraveling of this intricate world. The decline of falconry's secret tongues. You sense it first in the silence. Fewer falcons rest on the perches. Fewer apprentices shadow the masters. The guild halls that once buzzed with coded whispers grow quieter, their oaths whispered less often, their secrets shared with fewer eager ears. Historians still argue whether this decline was gradual erosion or swift collapse. But most agree that it wasn't any one blow that dimmed falconry's ancient languages. It was 1,000 slow cuts from a changing world. The first wound came with the rise of firearms. As crossbows gave way to muskets and muskets to rifles, the utility of trained birds for hunting and military work began to fade. Why train a hawk to catch a hare when a single shot could do it more easily? You watch one young lord practice his shooting nearby his expensive wheel-lock pistol, cracking like thunder. His falconer stands quietly behind him, hands folded, his hawk resting hooded. The bird's usefulness here feels more decorative than essential. The falconer whispers to you, "Our birds can outfly the musket, but not the fashion." The second blow was political. As centralized nation-states replaced feudal courts, the tight-knit noble networks that supported falconry guilds began to fray. The private funding that allowed for extravagant breeding programs, foreign imports, and multi-year apprenticeships simply dried up. Without noble patrons demanding gyrfalcons from the Arctic or sockers from the steppes, the once glorious trade routes narrowed. The secret breeding ledgers began to gather dust. The guild oaths were recited less often. Historians still debate whether guilds tried to adapt or resisted modernization too long. Some attempted to open public schools of falconry, but few commoners could afford such luxuries, and fewer governments saw any use for them. Then came industrialization, perhaps the most insidious wound of all. Cities swelled. Farmland shrank. The sprawling open spaces where falconry thrived became patchworks of fences, railways, and factories. One old falconer laments, "Our sky grows smaller every year. With shrinking land came shrinking flocks. Wild game dwindled." The delicate ecological balance falconers once understood which birds nested where, which winds carried thermals, which fields held rabbits, all began to fade. Even language itself began to erode. Without the daily repetition of training, feeding, and hunting, the coded vocabulary slipped away. Terms like yarrick and mantling became museum curiosities instead of living words. The apprentices who once spent years memorizing whispered rhythms found other work in cities and factories. You glimpse one of the few remaining guild ledgers, its pages yellowed, its careful ciphered notes, written for generations who would never read them. What was once protected knowledge now risks becoming permanently lost knowledge. And yet, echoes remain. Even as falconry faded from noble courts, a few private enthusiasts and scholars worked to preserve what they could. Historians still argue whether these efforts truly saved the full richness of the secret languages, or simply offered pale reconstructions based on surviving texts. But the passion behind their preservation work is unmistakable. You meet one such preservationist carefully transcribing old falconry manuals into modern print. He smiles, "The birds forget nothing. It is we who forget." Modern falconry survives today, but rarely with the layered secrecy, political utility, or linguistic complexity that once defined it. The secret whistles, guild codes, and battlefield signals now live mostly in scattered books, museum archives, and the fading memories of the last traditional masters. Even the birds have changed. Once prized royal bloodlines have been diluted or lost entirely. Where once only kings could own a gyrfalcon, now hobbyists breed hybrids for sport or conservation. And yet, even as you stand amid the ruins of this ancient language, you sense that something remains beneath the surface, like embers under cooled ash. The bond between bird and human survives, even if the secret words no longer flow as freely. Tomorrow you'll follow the few who've dedicated themselves to rediscovering and decoding these lost words, piecing together fragments of the falconer's forgotten speech from old scrolls, letters, and fragile whispers pulled back from the brink. The morning feels strangely hopeful as you step into the world of those who refuse to let the old whispers fully die. Today you follow the work of historians, linguists, and passionate falconry revivalists, those dedicated to lost words rediscovered by historians, piecing together the secret bird languages from fragments scattered across dusty archives. You arrive at a small stone library far less grand than the royal halls you've seen. But its shelves are filled with a different kind of treasure, centuries-old manuscripts, guild records, personal journals, and crumbling training logs. Historians still argue whether the records that survive offer a full picture of falconry's secret languages or merely shadows of the original craft. But for these researchers, even shadows are precious. One scholar gently opens a leather-bound tome. The handwriting curls like ivy, its Latin phrases interspersed with the familiar jargon you've come to recognize. Baiting, yarrick. Mantling, casting. Each word becomes a small window into daily life for handlers long gone. Nearby, another researcher flips through letters between noble falconers, their personal correspondence filled with coded references. The young Ayas responds well to the lure. Her footing grows more sure, though her mantling remains wide. To outsiders, casual bird talk. To trained eyes, precise notes on progress and behavioral cues written for fellow guild members who would understand every nuance. You watch as linguists cross-reference these scattered terms across cultures. Arabic treatises using Bazdar, keeper of the falcon. Mongolian field notes listing vocal cues like hoo-hoo. Persian manuals describing shikargar, the art of the hunt. Historians still debate whether these linguistic echoes point to a shared ancient root or simply parallel evolution born of similar needs. But the overlaps are undeniable. One linguist explains with a gleam in his eye. Different tongues, same task. Patterns emerge. You witness them reconstruct not just vocabulary, but the rhythm of falconer's speech, the rise and fall of murmurs designed to calm or excite the birds. Even without live demonstrations, the texts hint at tone, short rising syllables to summon, long falling sounds to soothe, clicks, hums, and tongue rolls woven between words. In another room, a small team works on decoding guild ciphers used in training ledgers. What once masked feeding schedules and bloodline notes now offers glimpses into the daily pulse of Muse, long vanished. S2, RH4Y3, Syracuse. Second season right-hand flight, 3 years. Historians still argue whether these codes were developed purely for secrecy or also for efficiency among guild members who needed quick private shorthand for record-keeping. Probably both. You even witness experimental falconers attempting to retrain modern birds using these rediscovered cues. They test reconstructed whistle patterns, ancient lure swings, and vocal cadences pulled from texts. The results are mixed, but encouraging. Some birds seem to respond instinctively to rhythms they've never heard before, as if something ancient stirs within them. One falconer smiles. Perhaps the birds never forgot as much as we did. Even equipment designs offer clues. By studying surviving hoods, lures, jesses, and gloves, researchers reverse engineer handling methods implied by the gear itself. How certain jess lengths suggest lead distances for training. How lure weights align with described swing patterns. How hood designs reflect not just aesthetics, but comfort and control. You see side-by-side comparisons of European, Arabian, and Mongolian gear, with the differences revealing regional philosophies, precision versus flexibility, dominance versus partnership control versus cooperation. Every recovered phrase adds one more stitch to the fragile tapestry. One notebook long forgotten in a manor archive contains an entire glossary. Strike, the bird's attack. Stoop, the dive. Uncast, the gorge, the act of vomiting up indigestible parts after feeding. Weathering, allowing the bird exposure to sun and wind. What once served as ordinary daily language now feels sacred, a resurrection of lost breath. Historians still debate whether the full complexity of medieval falconry's secret languages can ever be fully restored. So much was passed orally through demonstration and repetition, never written down. Entire guild phrases likely died with their last speakers. And yet, standing among these passionate revivalists, you see that what was once forgotten may never be fully lost. The work itself keeps the craft alive, piece by piece, syllable by syllable. As one historian quietly summarizes, we may never speak exactly as they did, but we hear enough echoes to whisper again. Tomorrow, you'll walk gently toward the quiet end of this journey, reflecting on the lasting legacy of the Falconers' whispers, where fragments of their language still echo faintly in modern practice and memory. The final morning rises soft and still. The winds are light, the fields quiet, and the last hooded falcons sit calmly on their perches as you walk slowly, thoughtfully into the world that remains the quiet legacy of the Falconers' whispers. The roaring guild halls are gone now. The royal courts no longer echo with coded calls across open lawns. The battlefield lures have long since been traded for signal flags, radios, and satellites. Yet even in this stillness, faint threads remain thin but unbroken. You meet a modern falconer preparing his bird for flight. His gloves are newer, his gear lighter, his techniques a hybrid of ancient and modern knowledge. But as he gently lifts the hood from his peregrine, you recognize something deeply familiar in the way he murmurs, "Steady now, girl. Hup hup." The echoes of medieval cadences survive, woven almost unconsciously into his voice. Historians still argue whether today's falconers preserve true fragments of the secret guild languages or simply replicate familiar patterns passed down by habit. But here, watching closely, you feel the ghost of the old rhythm humming beneath modern layers. You hear the same brief vocabulary: manning, baiting, stoop, casting, yarrick. The words remain. Their meanings endure. The once secret language may no longer serve as a protective code, but its precision still holds value, a vocabulary perfectly tailored for a craft unchanged in its fundamentals for centuries. Even newer falconers trained with modern manuals and YouTube videos still find themselves slipping into the old phrasing as though pulled by instinct. The words fit the work like a glove fits the fist. One falconer smiles as he explains, "You don't say it's nervous. You say it's baiting. You don't say it's ready to hunt. You say it's in yarrick." The old words just feel right. Beyond the words themselves, the silent language lives on. The body posture, the hand signals, the rhythmic breathing, the soft whistles and hums, the gentle claps perfectly timed. Even if modern falconers don't think of themselves as speaking a secret language, their birds still respond to cues nearly identical to those used by medieval handlers centuries ago. You witness a simple training session. The hand rises, fingers tight. The head dips slightly. The whistle trills. The bird launches. No words are spoken. The conversation unfolds entirely in movement and tone. Historians still debate whether this continuity reflects intentional preservation or the natural endurance of methods that simply work. But as you watch, the conclusion feels obvious. The core language of falconry was never fully forgotten because it was never entirely written. It was lived. And even where falconry itself has become rare, the language lingers in places few notice. Phrases borrowed into common speech, fed up, drawn from overfed hawks who refuse to fly, under one's thumb, recalling the handler's firm but gentle hold. Hoodwinked, from the bird's hood keeping it calm by blocking its vision. You smile, realizing that the falconer's whispers still echo in the words you use every day, without ever thinking of their origins. One modern master puts it simply as he watches his bird soar. The world changed, but the falcon still flies, and perhaps that is the heart of it all. The secret bird languages may have frayed, but they've never truly vanished. Like the falcons themselves, they remain tethered lightly, delicately to the hands and voices of those few who still call them. Now the fields grow quiet once more, the last falcons resting beneath soft hoods as the breeze fades. You close your eyes for a moment, hearing not the clamor of courts or the urgency of coded whispers, but only the rhythmic breath of handlers and birds, steady and calm. The secret language of the falconers doesn't roar. It hums like low wind through tall grass, steady as the pulse of quiet trust. Though the guilds have faded, the vocabulary softened, and the old codes dimmed, their whispers still ripple gently beneath modern voices, gently echoing into each training flight, each launch, each return. You picture the ancient handlers now, their patient hands, their quiet eyes, their soft murmurs barely rising above the wing beats. The same patience, the same rhythm, the same partnership plays out today across fields and hills, desert dunes, and city outskirts. Let your mind drift gently now. The falcons circle far above, sharp-eyed and elegant against a wide open sky. Below them, their handlers stand steady, calling softly, waiting with open gloves, calm hearts, and trusted rhythm. The old words settle softly into silence. The birds rest, the hands lower, the wind still, and your breath slows. Sleep comes easily now, like a hood drawn gently over your own eyes. The whispers fade, but the story remains. Sweet dreams.